My name is Lila Hart. I'm 33 years old. And this is the story of how I was cast aside like a burden, only to uncover the legacy that changed everything. It all began 3 weeks after my father passed away. He died quietly, in the early hours of a Sunday morning. I was sitting beside his bed when it happened. His hand in mine, the sound of his labored breaths slowly fading into silence. It wasn't dramatic or loud. It was just stillness. Like the mountains outside the window had exhaled one last time for him. He had fought pancreatic cancer for almost a year. A cruel, fast illness that drained him piece by piece, but never took away his dignity. I moved back into our family home to care for him full-time. I bathed him, fed him, watched his hands tremble as he tried to button up his shirt by himself. I held him when he cried and listened when he couldn't speak anymore. And my sister, Scarlett, she was in New York, PR executive, always in meetings, always too busy. Once, she even told me she didn't do well with sad things, as if grief were a lifestyle choice I had signed up for. She didn't call much, didn't write. The last time she came home before the funeral was 5 years ago, for a weekend wedding. When she finally arrived for the funeral, late of course, she stepped out of her black SUV in heels that dug into the gravel and a designer coat that looked like it cost more than my annual salary at the library. She barely acknowledged Mom. Not even a glance at me. Just strolled into the chapel like a guest at someone else's tragedy. 3 days after the service, we sat in the living room while our family lawyer, Mr. Langford, read the will. My heart raced. I wasn't expecting anything. I didn't care about money. But part of me still hoped. Maybe Dad had written something personal. Letter. Thank you. A memory sealed in words. Mr. Langford's voice was calm, clinical. To my beloved wife Ruth, I leave the family home and all adjacent property. Scarlett smirked. I felt it in my chest like a slap. To my daughter Scarlett Hart, I leave the remainder of my estate. My savings accounts, stock investments, and personal effects located in the main residence. Scarlett's smirk widened. She tilted her head back like a queen crowned. And to my daughter Lila Hart. Mr. Langford hesitated, glancing up at me. I leave the back house and the rear garden lot, located beyond the west fence line. Scarlett burst into laughter. The shed. Seriously? She said, not even trying to hide her sarcasm. The one with the hole in the roof and a squirrel infestation. I didn't speak. My throat was too tight. That back house was barely standing. Dad always called it the Hermit Hut, a run-down little garden cottage he used as a reading retreat when I was younger. I hadn't stepped foot in there in years. After Mr. Langford packed up, my mom handed me an old iron key. Go alone, she said softly, eyes misty but knowing. I walked out into the backyard while the snow melted under my boots. The cottage sat like a forgotten memory behind the trees. Paint peeling, roof bowed, one side scorched from an old lightning strike. I pushed open the door. Groaned. Dust floated in the air like old ghosts. The place smelled like damp wood and moss. Bookshelf. A rotting table. Torn rug in the center. Then I saw it. A photo hanging above the fireplace. Me and Dad. I was 16, holding a cup of cocoa, grinning next to him on the porch steps. I reached for the frame, but something tugged at the edge of my memory. Dad's voice from months ago. When I'm gone, look for what I left behind. It's not in the will. I knelt to the floor. The rug seemed off. Too stiff. I peeled it back and found a trapdoor. My breath caught. I used the old key. Blick. Staircase led down. I grabbed my phone flashlight and descended into the darkness. There in the tiny basement was a desk. On top, a black metal box with a note taped on. Lila. Open when you're ready. My hands shook as I unlatched it. Inside were documents, stacks of them. The first envelope read, investment account for Lila Hart only. I flipped through, heart pounding. Deposits. An account in my name started over 10 years ago. The current balance. $512,348. I staggered back, dizzy. Not from the money but from what it meant. Dad hadn't left me nothing. He'd left me everything that mattered. Quietly, carefully, hidden in a place only I would think to look. Because he knew Scarlett wouldn't bother. He knew she wouldn't stay. She wouldn't care. But I had. I had been there every day, even when it broke me. And this was his way of telling me that he saw me. That love doesn't always come wrapped in titles or bank accounts. Sometimes it comes in silence, in trust, in the smallest rusting key. And this was only the beginning. I didn't sleep at all that night. I sat at the edge of my bed, holding that yellow envelope, rereading the investment documents until the sunrise washed the sky with pale pinks and oranges. I felt like I was holding my father's final heartbeat in my hands. Not money, something deeper. A message in numbers. A lifetime of quiet preparation for the one daughter who stayed. I didn't tell anyone. Not Mom. Not Scarlett. Not even Mr. Langford. Not yet. But I couldn't shake Dad's words from my memory. Look for what I left behind. It's not in the will. As the morning light filtered through my bedroom curtains, I knew one thing for certain. This wasn't over. Not yet. I went back to the shed. The old wooden floor creaked under my boots as I stepped inside again, this time with a flashlight, gloves, and a notebook. I needed to document everything. My librarian instinct kicked in. The basement had already given me one miracle. Could there be more? I pulled off the furniture covers, opened every drawer, examined every wall and floorboard. It was quiet. I almost gave up, until I noticed something odd along the back brick wall. A fine gap, thin, almost invisible, running along the baseboard. I got on my knees and felt it with my fingertips. It was cold, too, even to be just a flaw in the masonry. I grabbed a small paring knife from the old kitchenette and gently worked it into the gap. Blick. The entire section of wall swung open, revealing a narrow passage, no wider than a closet. My heart thudded so hard I could hear it echo in my ears. I slipped inside with my flashlight, and there it was. Safe. An old moss-green safe, heavy as a tomb, coated in decades of dust. Gasp. I knew that safe. It used to sit in Dad's office when he still ran his construction company. I used to spin in his office chair and try to guess the combination as a kid. Once I asked him what was inside and he just smiled. A grown-up secret, he'd said. Maybe one day you'll know. I almost laughed from the memory, and then cried from how close I felt to him again. I ran back to the basement to the black metal box. Inside, under the documents, were two small keys. One was bronze, the other steel. I brought both back to the secret room. The bronze didn't fit, but the steel one, it slid in like it was waiting for me. Blick. I turned the handle. The door creaked open. And inside, my breath caught, were velvet-lined boxes. Dozens of them. Each labeled in Dad's careful handwriting. Open the first one. Inside was a Rolex. Not just any Rolex, but a 1960s GMT Master, perfectly preserved. The next held a Patek Philippe. Then a vintage Omega. Then a gold Hamilton. Each one was exquisite. Meticulously preserved. I sat down on the floor, overwhelmed. My father hadn't just been investing in a bank account. He'd been building a hidden collection. Legacy. One only I would find. One only I would understand. Each watch had a small note tucked inside. Stories. Wore this to your kindergarten graduation. Bought this after closing my first solo contract. Saved this one for when you'd need it most. Tears ran freely down my cheeks as I opened each box. This wasn't about wealth. This was about remembrance. About memory. About love expressed through time. Literally. At the back of the safe was a sealed envelope, marked with the name of a luxury appraisal firm in Boston. Inside were certificates, appraisals, documents that confirmed what I now suspected. The total collection was valued at over $520,000. I couldn't move. I sat on the wooden floor, the old safe still open behind me, velvet boxes stacked around me like time capsules. I whispered aloud, "Dad, why didn't you just say something?" But I already knew. He didn't need Scarlett to know. Or Mom. Or even me until I was ready. He didn't want a fight. He didn't want his legacy reduced to a will war. So he gave Scarlett what she expected. And he gave me what I had earned in silence. That night I didn't sleep again. Instead, I opened each box once more, memorizing every watch, every scratch, every note. The love he had for me wasn't loud. It was carved into every decision he made. He knew I wouldn't ask for anything, that I'd never demand a thing. But he gave it all to me anyway. The next morning I called Mr. Langford. I told him everything. There was a long pause on the phone before he said, "Your father was deliberate. If he didn't put it in the will, it's because he didn't want it contested. But technically, the safe being in the back house is part of the estate portion you legally inherited. It's yours." I asked him what I should do. "Hire an accountant," he said. "A good one. Don't sit on this." He gave me the name of Clara Jensen, a specialist in Montpelier. She came to the house 2 days later. Clara was kind, professional, with short gray-streaked hair and a no-nonsense tone. She wore gloves while examining the watches, scanning each certificate, cross-checking every valuation. "This collection is extraordinary," she said. "If you auction these properly, some might even go above the listed appraisals." I nodded, still stunned. "What are your plans?" she asked. I thought for a moment. "I'll keep the ones that matter," I said. "The ones tied to memories. The rest, they should go to people who appreciate them the way he did." She smiled, then reached into her bag and handed me a form. "You're handling this better than most people I've seen," she said. "You're not letting the value cloud the meaning." I nodded, but my hands were trembling. 'Cause deep down I knew something else too. This was all a time bomb. Scarlett was going to find out. And when she did, she wouldn't just be angry. She'd be dangerous. It was a week later when the storm finally hit. Up until then, I had managed to keep everything quiet. Clara helped me start the tax paperwork, and we began the process of appraising and listing the watches I didn't plan to keep. I chose to keep 3. The simple silver pocket watch Dad used to carry to church, the gold Bulova Mom gave him on their anniversary, and the Hamilton he handed to me the day I got hired at the town library. "The best part of being on time," he said with a wink, "is that you don't miss the little things." Held on to those. Everything else went into storage, carefully packed and catalogued, waiting for the auction house in Boston to finalize the listing process. After taxes and fees, Clara estimated I would walk away with about $340,000. I didn't think about what I would do with the money yet. I wasn't ready. Instead, I spent my days cleaning up the main house with Mom, helping her settle into a life without him, piece by painful piece. She still made 2 cups of tea every morning, then silently poured one down the sink, her own private ritual of goodbye. But that peace shattered the day Scarlett showed up. I was folding laundry in the back room when I heard the car tires crunch over the driveway gravel. Through the window, I saw her step out of a black sedan, designer bag on one arm, heels sinking into the wet earth. But something was different. She looked hollow, not composed, not smug, just lost. I met her at the door. For a moment, we simply stared at each other. "Hey," she said flatly, eyes glassy. "You want to come in?" "Yes." She nodded and stepped inside, her heels clicking across the hardwood. I led her into the kitchen and poured her a cup of tea. She didn't say thank you. She didn't take off her coat. "I heard," she said after a long silence, "that you've been sending gifts to the people who helped Dad." I blinked. "Just small things. A thank you." She looked up at me, eyes sharp now. "Where did you get the money?" Froze. "What do you mean?" "You don't have that kind of money, Lila," she snapped. "You work at a library. You drive a car with a cracked windshield. So don't play dumb." I saw Aunt Nora last weekend," she continued, voice rising. "She told me you gave her a $500 gift card. And then I remembered. You were acting strange after the will. Quiet. Secretive. Always around that old shed like it suddenly mattered." I said nothing. There was no point. Scarlett leaned forward, her face inches from mine. What did you find, Lila? Her voice was venom, but beneath it, I heard something worse. Desperation. You had your share, I said softly. Dad gave you what he wanted you to have. She stood up so quickly the chair screeched against the floor. I deserved more, she shouted. I gave up everything to be successful. I worked my ass off in New York while you played nursemaid in this tiny town. Don't act like that makes you a saint. You weren't here, I said, more sad than angry. Not once. Not even when he begged for you. Scarlett's face twisted and she grabbed her coat, storming to the door. I don't care what secrets you're hiding, she hissed. If there's something in that house that should have been mine, I will find it. You can't bury the truth forever. The door slammed. And just like that I knew it was no longer about curiosity. It was war. That night I didn't sleep. Couldn't. And just past midnight the phone rang. It was Mom. Her voice was trembling. Lila, someone broke in. What? I thought it was a burglar. But it was Scarlett. I saw her with a flashlight in the basement. She wouldn't answer me. Then she ran out. I was out the door in 10 minutes. When I arrived at the main house, the basement door was ajar, boxes strewn across the floor. One of the side walls had been ripped open. She must have remembered the old office safe from when we were kids. But the safe was untouched. I spotted it right away. Its heavy door still locked tight. But next to it, smeared in the dust, was a single muddy footprint. The same high-end shoe Scarlett wore earlier that day. I stood frozen, because I realized something terrifying. She wasn't going to stop. And I was no longer sure I could stop her without losing everything again. The next few days passed in silence. Then, one Sunday morning, Mom called again. Her voice was hollow, panicked. Lila. You need to go to the hospital. What happened? It's Scarlett. She's been hurt. My stomach dropped. The safe, Mom whispered. It fell on her. 15 minutes later, I was racing into the emergency room. I found Mom first, pale, shaking, holding her scarf like a lifeline. She came to the house last night, she said. Said she was looking for keepsakes. I didn't think. I didn't know. My heart pounded. What happened? She was in the basement. I heard a loud crash. She was screaming. The doctor found us in the waiting room an hour later. She has a fractured leg, he said. And some soft tissue damage to her lower back. She's stable, but she'll need weeks of recovery. When I finally stepped into her hospital room, she didn't look at me. She stared blankly at the ceiling, leg in a cast, face pale and exhausted. What are you doing here? She asked coldly. I'm not really sure, I said honestly. She scoffed. Don't look at me like you're perfect. I know about the safe. I know what's inside. I said nothing. She sighed. You think I'm just some greedy witch, don't you? I think you're hurt, I replied softly. But that doesn't excuse breaking into Mom's house. She turned her head away. You think your life's been hard. Mine hasn't been easy either, Lila. I stayed silent. What was there to say? That pain doesn't excuse betrayal. That grief doesn't give you license to steal. As I turned to leave, someone else walked in. A tall man in a dark suit. Ryan. Her husband. He didn't even glance at me. He walked to Scarlett's bedside, placed a stack of papers on the tray table and said flatly, I brought the divorce papers. Sign them. Scarlett's mouth fell open. What? Ryan's face was stone. You burned through your inheritance. Racked up debt. Hired a stylist instead of a therapist. I stayed quiet too long. But breaking into your own mother's house. That's the line. Scarlett gasped. I just wanted what was mine. Ryan looked her dead in the eyes. And your father gave it to you. You chose what to do with it. He turned to me, nodded once and left. Scarlett threw her pillow at the wall in frustration. He doesn't understand. Neither do you, she said. I bent down, picked it up and placed it back on the bed. No, I whispered. You're the one who refuses to understand. I left the hospital with a heavy heart. And as I stepped outside into the crisp February air, I realized something. Scarlett had finally lost everything. But me. I had only just begun to build. Spring came quietly that year. The snow began to melt in thin streaks across the rooftops, leaving muddy trails that ran along the sidewalks like veins. Trees budded early, and sunlight warmed the kitchen floors in slow golden slants each morning. But even as the town woke from winter's sleep, a heaviness lingered in our home. Scarlett remained in the hospital for another 2 weeks. I didn't visit again. Not because I hated her, I didn't. But because I finally understood something important. I couldn't save her. Not from herself. Not from the choices she kept making. And maybe, just maybe, she had to fall all the way down before she could stand up on her own. Mom visited her once or twice. Brought her food. Sat with her quietly. That was just who Mom was. Soft-hearted even to those who wounded her. As for me, I poured myself into rebuilding our life. I took a leave of absence from the library and focused entirely on organizing everything Dad had left behind. I used a portion of the money to renovate the main house for Mom. Repainted the walls, repaired the porch, even replanted the small flower garden Dad once tended every spring. In the evenings, I would walk out to the back house with a warm mug of tea and sit on the wooden steps, looking out over the field. The shed didn't feel like a ruin anymore. Felt like a monument. A memory with roots. Every board, every nail, every hidden drawer reminded me that sometimes, the biggest gifts in life don't come wrapped in ribbons. They come wrapped in silence, in dust, in time. Then something happened. Something I never saw coming. 2 days after Scarlett was discharged, I woke up to nausea. Not just a wave of queasiness, but a force that twisted through me like a sharp gust of wind. First I blamed stress. Too many sleepless nights. Too much emotional weight. But it didn't stop. It returned the next morning. And the one after. I drove to the pharmacy and bought a pregnancy test almost on autopilot. Back home, I paced the bathroom floor with it clutched in my hand. When the 2 red lines appeared, I sat on the edge of the tub and burst into tears. Not fear. Not panic. Just a tidal wave of emotion I hadn't known I was holding back. Baby. A new beginning. A life growing inside me at the very moment everything else had been broken down. When I told Mom, she hugged me so tightly I could barely breathe. Her hands trembled as she held my face. Your father would have been so proud, she whispered through tears. He always dreamed of holding a grandchild. I nodded, blinking away my own. He still will. In a way. After that day, everything changed. I started seeing the house differently. Not as the place where I had once lived, but the place I would raise my child. I moved in with Mom for good. We turned the back bedroom into a nursery. I painted the walls a pale, hopeful yellow. I pulled Dad's old books down from the attic and placed them on a shelf, ready for bedtime stories that hadn't yet been read. Life felt possible again. Meanwhile, Scarlett unraveled. Ryan followed through on the divorce. Closed her credit cards. Took the car. And for the first time in her adult life, Scarlett had no safety net. No more Manhattan skyline. No more curated brunches or company perks. Just a tiny rental unit on the west side of town, near the industrial zone, where the paint peeled off the walls and trains rattled past at midnight. She got a part-time job at a hardware store. I didn't see her, but Mom told me. Said she wore jeans for the first time in years. Said her heels were packed away. That the polish had chipped from her nails and she looked like someone still deciding whether to fight or surrender. Kept my distance. Not out of spite but necessity. Because forgiveness, real forgiveness, isn't instant. It's earned in time. And I still had a baby to protect. One rainy afternoon, maybe 2 months later, Scarlett came by. Unannounced. I heard the knock at the front door and opened it to see her standing there, soaked from the walk, holding a small cardboard box in her arms. "Can I come in?" she asked. I hesitated, then nodded. She stepped inside, glanced around, and said nothing for a long moment. Finally, she handed me the box. "I found these," she said, "in an old document bag. Back when I was packing things up at Ryan's." I opened the box slowly. Inside were several photographs of Dad from years ago. Family vacations, fishing trips, even an old Polaroid of the three of us, me, Scarlett, and Dad, sitting in the garden, covered in dirt after planting tulips. I laughed softly despite myself. And then I saw it. An envelope. Addressed to me in Dad's handwriting. "Layla, if you're reading this, then I'm probably no longer around." My hands trembled as I unfolded the paper. "But I believe in you. I always have." The back house wasn't the smallest thing I had. It was the biggest. Because it held my trust. Not everyone can carry that. But you can. You always could. I hope one day it helps you see just how much I saw in you. I folded the letter carefully, blinking through hot tears. Scarlett hadn't left yet. She stood quietly, arms wrapped around herself, staring at the floor. "I'm sorry," she said, barely audible. "For the safe?" "Yes." She shook her head. "For all of it. Years. The silence. The way I turned my back on you, on him, on this place." "I don't hate you," I said. "I hated myself enough for both of us," she replied, voice breaking. I watched her eyes fill again, but this time they weren't hollow. They were human. And maybe for the first time, real. I didn't say I forgave her. I just nodded. Sometimes, forgiveness isn't a word. It's the absence of resentment. She turned and walked away slowly, her silhouette disappearing into the misty street, leaving muddy footprints behind. Closed the door, placed the letter on the mantel, and gently rested my hand on my belly. Behind me, a chapter had ended. Ahead of me, something new had already begun. The next few weeks unfolded like the slow bloom of early spring. Gentle, hesitant, but full of promise. I spent my days preparing the nursery with Mom, stacking picture books in neat rows and folding tiny clothes I hadn't yet fully believed would be worn by my own child. At night, I sat by the back window of the house, tea in hand, my father's letter folded like scripture beside me. I read it almost daily. Not because I needed the words again, but because I needed the feeling. That quiet assurance that someone once saw me completely. Not as a burden, not as someone in the shadow of a louder sibling, but as someone worthy of trust, of love, of legacy. The auction for Dad's watches finally closed in early May. Clara handled all the logistics. She called me from Boston, her voice calm but warm. Final total after fees and taxes came in at $342,000, she said. "You did well, Lila. Really well." I thanked her, though I didn't know what to say. The number was almost surreal. I moved most of it into a secure trust account, something that could support my child down the line. College, medical care, a future. I kept a small portion in cash and used it to give back in quiet ways, just as Dad would have. Mr. Tom, our elderly neighbor who shoveled snow during Dad's last winter, received a new winter coat and a prepaid heating bill for the year. Nurse June, who once stayed past her shift to sit by Dad's side when I couldn't, got a thank you envelope with a handwritten card and a spa voucher. Even Dr. Wells, who had delivered the final, devastating prognosis with such grace, received a contribution in his name to the cancer foundation he supported. None of it was flashy. But none of it needed to be. Gratitude doesn't require applause. Just needs to be spoken. Meanwhile, I kept to myself. I stayed home more, read more, dreamed more. My belly grew rounder each day, and with it, my sense of purpose. The library sent me get well cards and promised my job would be waiting when I was ready. Mom remained my anchor. Steady. Gentle. Present. She read parenting books with me in the evenings, cooked for two when I was too tired to move, and sat with me on the porch with her hand over mine when the memories of Dad washed over us too strong to speak. And Scarlett, she stayed quiet, until the day she showed up again. This time she didn't knock. I found her sitting on the porch swing, a brown paper bag beside her, looking out toward the woods like she used to when we were kids. I opened the front door slowly. "You hungry?" I asked. She looked over at me and nodded. "I made us grilled cheese and tomato soup. Something simple, Something familiar. She didn't say much while we ate. Just stared at her plate, breaking the crust off the sandwich like she used to when she was nervous. When the plates were cleared, she finally spoke. "I'm working 2 jobs now," she said. "Day shift at the hardware store. Evenings at a local bakery." He nodded. "How's that going?" I shrugged. "I'm tired all the time. But for the first time, I sleep at night. Not because life is easy, but because I don't feel like I'm pretending anymore." I looked at her. Really looked. Her eyes were different. Softer. Not polished by pride or hiding behind mascara and sarcasm. Just a human. "I went through my old things last week," she said, voice cracking slightly. "And I found something." She reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a small, wrinkled envelope. Inside was a faded photograph. Scarlett and me, maybe ages 10 and 12, sitting cross-legged in the back garden, covered in dirt and giggling. Dad stood behind us with a shovel in one hand and a juice box in the other. "I forgot we had this," she said quietly. "I forgot I used to be happy here." I took the photo and stared at it for a long time. "I was jealous," she whispered. "Of you. Of how close you were with Dad. Of how you could sit quietly with him for hours and be content. I thought, if I left and made something of myself, I could fill that space with awards and money and power." I paused. "But nothing filled it, Lila. Nothing." I said nothing. Just let her speak. "I hated you for staying. For being better. For earning his trust when I thought it was owed to me by birthright." She wiped her eyes. "And I'm sorry." The wind picked up softly, brushing strands of hair across my face. "You hurt me," I said. "You tried to take what wasn't yours. You lied. You broke into Mom's house. And even now, I don't know if I fully trust you." "I don't expect you to," she said. But I needed to say it anyway. We sat there for a while longer, 2 sisters who had lost more years than we could ever get back, but who, for the first time in a long time, sat in silence that didn't sting. Just as Scarlett stood to leave, she paused. "If you ever want help fixing up the shed," she said, "I know a few things now. About tools. About repairs. About starting over." I smiled faintly. "Maybe." She nodded and walked down the steps, the paper bag still clutched in one hand. After she left, I unfolded the photo again and ran my finger along the edges. The dirt on our cheeks. The smiles that hadn't yet learned to hide anything. The space between us. Not quite healed, but maybe no longer fractured. Dad had given me more than a secret. He'd given me the chance to rewrite what family could mean. Not perfect. Not repaired. But reimagined. And sometimes that's enough. Summer arrived in quiet pulses. Longer days, fireflies at dusk, and a warmth that seemed to settle into the bones of the house. The lilac bush in the front yard blossomed early that year, filling the air with sweet, nostalgic perfume. It was the kind of summer my father loved. Barefoot mornings, lemonade on the porch, and slow, golden evenings that felt like time stretching just to linger with us. I was 7 months pregnant by then. The weight of the baby was beginning to change how I moved, how I slept, how I thought. I started talking to my belly, reading aloud chapters from Dad's old adventure books, or humming his favorite jazz records. Sometimes I imagined him standing just outside the nursery, leaning against the doorframe, arms crossed with that quiet smile he used to wear whenever he was proud but didn't want to say it aloud. The money from the watch auction stayed untouched in the trust account. I didn't feel right using it for myself. But I knew someday I would tell my child the story behind it. The watches, the secret safe, the man who loved in silence, but never without purpose. One morning I walked out to the back house again. The shed. It still looked worn but no longer abandoned. I had cleared out the cobwebs, aired out the rooms, repainted the door. Mom and I had been slowly turning it into a small reading nook. Place to retreat. Not to escape the world, but to remember it. Quietly, deeply. I opened the front door, now painted a soft sage green, and stepped inside. The air smelled like cedar and old paper. I ran my fingers across the windowsill where sunlight spilled in, warming the floorboards. That's when I saw it. Shadow passing outside. I turned around just in time to see Scarlett walking up the path, holding something wrapped in a towel. "Hope I'm not interrupting," she said. "You're not," I replied cautiously. She stepped inside, looked around and gave a small smile. "It's beautiful in here now." "It was Dad's," I said. "Still feels like it is, in a way." Scarlett nodded, then handed me the bundle. "I brought you something." I unwrapped it slowly. Inside was a wooden picture frame. Made. Slightly crooked. Clearly amateur. But beautiful. Inside was the same photo she had given me weeks ago, of us as children in the garden, but now placed next to a second photo I'd never seen before. Dad holding baby me. His eyes crinkled in pure joy. He was wearing the Hamilton watch. The same one I'd kept. "He had that one on every birthday," she said. "Even when I wasn't here," Mom told me. I swallowed the lump rising in my throat. "Thank you. I made the frame in one of the hardware store workshops," she said shyly. "It's not perfect." "It doesn't have to be," I said, brushing my hand along the rough edges. "It's real. That's what matters." She looked around again, then asked, "Can I sit?" I nodded, and we both sank into the old armchairs facing the window. For a long moment, we just listened to the wind move through the trees. The silence wasn't heavy this time. It was shared. "I'm starting a new course next week," she said. "Night classes. Business accounting." Blinked. "Really?" "Yeah. I figured if I'm going to rebuild, I might as well learn how to do it right this time." Smiled. "I'm proud of you, Scarlett." She looked down, picking at her fingernail. "You don't have to say that. I'm not saying it because I have to. I'm saying it because I mean it." She exhaled slowly, then glanced at my belly. "Do you know yet?" "A girl," I said, and felt a small flutter beneath my ribs like a response. Scarlett's lips trembled just a little. "You're going to be a great mom." I didn't answer. Because in that moment, I knew that what she was really saying was, "You were the better daughter. The braver one. The one who stayed." But I didn't need to win. I didn't need to hear her say it. I just needed her to keep changing. To keep choosing something better. We sat in the back house until the sun dipped low behind the trees, casting golden shadows across the floorboards. Before she left, she asked, "Can I help paint the nursery?" He nodded. "Yellow." Her eyebrows lifted. "Really? That was Dad's favorite." "I know." She smiled softly. "Okay. I'll bring the brushes." After she left, I sat there alone in the fading light, holding the photo frame to my chest. Hit me then. The full arc of it all. The betrayal. The secrets. The safe. The accident. The apology. The slow, painful climb out of resentment into something almost like forgiveness. Not a clean slate, but a new page. I wasn't naive. I knew Scarlett would still stumble, that she might slip back into old habits. But she had started something. And I had made peace with the fact that her journey didn't need to look like mine. Because I wasn't building a mirror of my father's family. I was building my own. One rooted in trust. Time. In quiet, slow redemption. The nursery was finished by the second week of June. Yellow walls with soft white trim. A handmade mobile of clouds and stars gently swaying over the crib. Shelves lined with children's books Dad had read to me long ago. Charlotte's Web, The Wind in the Willows, The Secret Garden. I could almost hear his voice echoing the lines as I arranged each one by size. Scarlett came by every weekend to help. She brought brushes, snacks, and a playlist of old jazz songs she remembered from our childhood. We didn't talk much while we painted, but something unspoken filled the silence between us. Something close to peace. Sometimes she'd bring small things she made during her hardware classes. A wooden toy box with a lid that didn't quite fit. A bookshelf that leaned slightly left. I took every item gratefully. They weren't perfect, but neither were we. And that was okay. One warm afternoon, as I sat on the porch with Mom sipping lemonade, she turned to me with a gentle smile. "You know, your dad would be so proud," she said. I nodded slowly, blinking back tears. He always believed the best things in life were built slowly, she continued. Like trust, or gardens, or families. I think he knew I'd have to learn that the hard way, I said, half laughing. Mom placed her hand on mine. We all learn in our own time. I looked out at the back shed, the one I had once considered a punishment. Joke. Slap in the face. Now it stood quietly beneath the summer sun, repainted and reborn, holding more legacy than any house full of luxury. That night, I sat alone in the shed with the safe open in front of me. Not for money, not for planning, just for memory. I ran my fingers over the velvet boxes I hadn't sold. The 3 watches I kept. Dad's Hamilton still ticking. The Bulova Mom had given him. And the pocket watch he used to check every Sunday before church. I held them like heirlooms and promises. Each one carried a story I would tell my daughter someday. But the real treasure, it wasn't in the safe. It was the person I had become since unlocking it. A few days later, Scarlett asked if she could take me to my prenatal checkup. I hesitated at first but said yes. In the waiting room, she sat beside me fidgeting, glancing at the other expecting mothers with wide eyes. I feel like a fraud, she whispered. You're not, I replied. I spent so long chasing something I can't even remember now, she said. All that time in New York, trying to be someone important. You are important, I said. Just not in the way you thought. She looked at me and smiled weakly. You've changed, Lila. So have you, I said. The doctor called my name. I stood, and as I walked into the room, I heard Scarlett say behind me, "Tell her I said hi." The ultrasound showed a healthy heartbeat, steady and strong. My daughter kicked as if to say she was listening. When we returned home, I found an envelope on the porch. No address, just my name. Inside was a certificate from the auction house. One of the watches had sold again, and the new owner had written a note. He was a watchmaker in France. Said it reminded him of his grandfather, who worked on the same model 50 years ago. Said he would wear it to his wedding. I smiled, tucking the note into the photo album. Dad's legacy was still moving through the world, one tick at a time. On the day my daughter was born, it rained. Not a storm, just a quiet, steady rain that washed the dust from the trees and made the grass smell like earth and life. Her name was Wren. Wren Amelia Hart. She was tiny, with a soft tuft of brown hair and a cry that shattered me in the most beautiful way. Scarlett was the second person to hold her after Mom. She stood there in the hospital room, eyes wide with awe, whispering, "She's perfect, like a prayer." "She's yours too," I said softly. "Not by bloodline, by choice. Because family isn't defined by who you inherit from. It's defined by who stays when the walls fall. Who brings paintbrushes when you're rebuilding. Who says sorry when it would be easier not to." A week later, I received one last letter. It was from Mr. Langford, the lawyer. Inside was a copy of an old insurance policy Dad had tucked away. One final account, small but untouched, in my name only. Just enough to start a college fund. Dated the same year I moved back in to care for him. I laughed through tears. Of course he had planned one step ahead. He always did. That night, I walked out to the back house again, holding Wren in my arms. The moonlight poured in through the window, casting silver streaks across the floor. I sat in Dad's old armchair and rocked her gently, whispering stories into the stillness. About a quiet man who hid treasure in timepieces. About the daughter who stayed. About the sister who left, and came back different. And about how sometimes, the most valuable inheritance isn't gold or stocks. It's the chance to choose who you become. To rebuild. To forgive. To love anyway. And I knew then, without a doubt, that Wren would grow up not just with stories, but with roots. And in time, maybe she'd walk into this same old shed, hold her grandfather's watch in her hand, and feel the same quiet strength I did now. A life that began with betrayal, and ended with legacy. This story began with a rotting shed and a will that seemed unfair. But what Lila discovered wasn't just financial wealth. It was a legacy of trust, quiet love, and strength passed down from a father who understood the true value of time. While greed nearly destroyed her sister, Lila's integrity rebuilt not just a home, but a future. Sometimes, the greatest inheritance isn't left in plain sight. It's hidden in the strength you didn't know you had. If this story moved you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Revenge Echoes for more emotional real-life inspired stories of betrayal, truth, and poetic justice.